When I used to tell this story to my shitty friends, they acted as though it wasn't a big deal and I was exaggerating to get attention, so I stopped talking about it. But now, as an adult who has lurked this sub for quite some time, I've realized I'm not alone. It's okay to talk about it if it makes me feel better or gives me closure, regardless of anyone who tells me to stop whining. So here goes. In the spring of 2006, I was 18 and apparently wildly naive. I lived in a fairly populated city where very few major crimes happened. Most of the time, when someone was murdered or missing, it always turned out to be in relation to people they knew or a drug deal gone bad. Very typical crime, nothing that could be classified as scary or induce parents to keep their children indoors. My boyfriend at the time worked at a gas station convenience store about 20 minutes away from where I lived at my parents' house. His shifts were from 3 in the afternoon until midnight, and he worked alone. Everyone who's ever worked in a place like that knows that some nights of the week are just slow, no matter how many people live in the area. On nights like that, when he knew that boss man wouldn't be back that evening, he would shoot me a text asking if I was interested in coming down to hang out or study or do whatever it is that I forgot I was doing at that age. Since I was completely convinced nothing was going to happen to me, Reed, idiot, I would walk down by myself and then head home around 11 when he had to start actually working to close the store. One fateful night, I was walking up from hanging out when a car pulled up to me and someone rolled down their window. Naturally, I stopped walking and leaned down to look in their car and ask them what they needed. Before you call me dumb, you should understand that in the area I lived, this isn't unusual behavior, because 9 times out of 10 it's someone asking directions, and then 1 times out of 10 it's because they thought you were someone they knew. So imagine my shock when I looked in the car and the first thing I see is a fucking gun sitting on this guy's passenger seat, sort of half hidden under a coat or sweater. I had never seen a handgun before. I started to sweat. The second thing I took in was that this guy had to be at least 40 and had a very creepy air about him. In my surprise, I hadn't noticed that he was asking me a question, so I sort of stumbled around my words and said something along the lines of, "What?" He responded with, "A fine thing like you shouldn't be walking around by yourself, baby. You get in the car, I'll give you a ride." This was said more like a statement than a request. I was still a good 10 minutes from my house, but there was no way I was getting in the car with this guy. I didn't want to piss him off, so in my panic state, I put on a sort of choked, cheerful voice and told him that it was cool because I only lived right there and pointed to a house about 10 meters away. He said something like, "That sucked, but I should give him my number so he can call me later." Again, not wanting to piss him off, I quickly gave him my boyfriend's number, thinking I was a genius because he'd drive home, call that number, and get told off by my boyfriend, and by the time he figured out anything, I'd be long gone home. He pulls away and I think I'm in the clear until I see that he drives off in the direction that I need to walk home in. Fuck. Not wanting to risk him seeing me, but wanting to get home ASAP, I make the quick choice to take the creepy dark shortcut behind the high school. Big mistake. He must have seen me dart up the hill before he had driven too far, because by the time I got up there and around the back of the school, I can see his car pulling up too fast for me to get out of sight. Like an idiot, I freeze when his car gets real close to me. He gets out and starts yelling like a crazy person, calling me a lying cunt and asking me why all the pretty girls lied to nice guys like him, how he just wanted to give me a ride and I had to be a bitch about it, and bitch, little girls need to be taught some manners. The whole time he was saying this, he was taking off his belt. There was a whole other slew of things he was yelling, but I was trying to block him out and weigh my options. Option 1, turn around and run into the pitch black field that I knew pretty well, down a giant ditch up the other side that goes right into a very nice neighborhood full of people letting out their little dogs to pee at that time of night, screaming my head off and hoping someone hears me. Option 2, run right by him down the street full of cars and people, but risk him grabbing me on the way by, or if he had his gun on his person, being a crazy fucker and shooting at me. Option 3, pee myself out of fear right there and then, and hope he thinks I'm gross and crazy and goes away. Option 3 was a really heavy contender for a moment. I can't actually say with full certainty that I chose option 1. I think it just happened on instinct or adrenaline or something, but while he was in the middle of telling me how I needed to be taught a lesson with his dick, I turned around and ran faster than I ever thought I could into the pitch black. I didn't even realize he was chasing after me until I jumped down into the ditch. As I was climbing up the other side, I heard him come falling straight down past me. He must not have seen that there was a drop-off coming, because from the sounds he was making, he was feeling the pain of an unexpected 7-foot drop. Because my luck had been so awesome up to this point, I was only a little surprised when I couldn't climb anymore because my sweater was caught on a bush or a branch that I couldn't make out very well in the dark. While I was frantically trying to get unstuck, I felt his hand close in around my ankle and try to pull me down. There was no room in front of me to try and pull my leg up out of his grasp, so after a struggle, I got the only actual good idea I'd had all night. I pulled myself up as hard as I could and suddenly let go, so that when he pulled me down, not only did I get released from being caught in the bush, I toppled him over, landing really hard on top of him. He had let go of me in the process, so I sprung back up and climbed up and out of the ditch and ran to the nearest house. To my great surprise, the woman who answered the door screamed when she opened it. I hadn't noticed on the short run from the ditch to the house, but my shirt was covered in blood. I didn't understand at first, because from what I could tell, I only had some scrapes and bruises. I eventually learned that when I landed on top of this guy, I broke his nose in such a way that it fucking exploded, blood everywhere. The police were called and he was arrested at the ER later that night while being treated for a broken nose and a fractured wrist. He was eventually, and by eventually I mean after 2 years of who knows what, only sentenced to 3 years for assault and carrying a concealed weapon without a license, but was given 2 years of time served because he had no priors. He was a fucking teacher. He had a son my age. My parents wanted to push for attempted rape, but my cousin, who was a paralegal, gave us a whole bunch of reasons about why it probably wouldn't go through, and that since it would be a charge we would lay separate from the other charges, the legal fees didn't seem worth it. At the time I didn't really understand how the system worked, and I just wanted the whole thing to be over. The worst thing was that I was only just 18, and if it had happened a month before, he would have been given so much more time for assaulting a minor. It's been 10 years and I still get nervous when a car drives by me a little too slowly, or when someone grabs me from behind, although now I am way quicker to just tell someone no. I always carry a can of pepper spray, and I have taken a few classes on basic self-defense, and when a friend offers to walk me home at night, I always say yes. So guy that tried to maybe murder and probably rape me, let's not meet. I like my clothes way too much to get them covered in your blood again.